Gender and language. Men and women differ in all areas of their lives. Not only do men and women communicate differently, but they think, feel, perceive, react, respond, need, and appreciate differently. According to the communication researcher Anthony Mulak, men speak more in fragments, use more judgmental language, and more directive statements, while women's sentences are typically longer than men's, refer more to feelings, and use intensive adverbs. Gender, work, and organization. Gender and communication at work. Rather than presenting linguistic gender differences as being due to the difference paradigm, which states that men and women speak differently because of early socialization, and the dominance paradigm, which holds that gender-based language differences reveal the economic dominance that men still typically exercise over women, a more complex view is offered here of gender difference as multi-layered and fluid. Gender and communication in social work education, a cross-cultural perspective. Gender differences. When men and women listen, they use different behaviors and may, in fact, listen for different things. Men tend to listen for the bottom line, for some action to be taken or decision to be made. Women tend to listen for details to fill in the full picture. Men use less eye contact and head nods. Women ask more questions and tend to work at maintaining the conversation. A cross-cultural interpretation. The idea of the distinct female and male subcultures is especially apparent in cultures such as those in the Middle East where women and men live more segregated lives. Communication between men and women. Before clarifying some distinctives in gender communication, several basic assumptions must be accepted. Both styles of communication are equally valid. The goal in gender communication is not to change the style of communication, but to adapt to the differences. I agree that both points are valid. Everyone communicates differently, including the genders, and if we build a bridge, it'll help us with communication. These 2 points are key to gender communication, and tying the two genders together in a positive communication. With this, although we feel different and we express ourselves differently, we can understand one another. Language and gender. Sexist language appears in all sorts of media on a daily basis, including advertising, film, print media, and others. Significantly, it disseminates specific roles for men and women as respectively dominant and passive. I agree with the statement on how women and men are perceived through media, but I don't like the fact that it can be difficult when both genders want to change the way they communicate. If a male who is taught to be dominant decides to change, it can be hard because everything and everyone around him will be telling him that he is not manly. I agree, everywhere you go and you look at the roles of men and women, it's still being controlled by the media. If one is concerned with others, they will refuse to learn or change. Not all men are quick with responses and not all women are long winded with conversation, but I feel we play a role on how we should communicate based off of what we see. Compare and contrast. Compare. All the articles talk about gender and language is different for men and women. Women are softer speaking when they're explaining things and expressing how they feel. Women are more expressive than men. Men typically are shorter answered and listen for the main point, while women listen for understanding. Contrast. The article about media shows the negative effects of how gender communication can have a bad effect on children. The article on culture shows how in other countries women's voices are still silenced. Only one article really gave a solution to fixing that gap. Conclusion. In conclusion, when it comes to gender and language, both genders communicate differently, but in the end, both genders have learned how to coexist in a way that we can still come together. In some areas, opposites attract, and we typically come together with someone who is completely different, but although this is true, we still struggle with our preference of communication. The key is not to change who you are, but to learn how to communicate better.